Hey everyone, and welcome back to 4D Forge. Today I'm going to be showing you how to create a stylized fireball in Blender. So let's get straight into it. We're going to delete our default cube, and let's go ahead and add a UV sphere in here, just like that. And then let's also add a meta ball. If you don't know what meta balls do, if you put two meta objects sort of by each other, they sort of mesh into each other like that, so you can get some pretty cool effects like that. But we don't need a second one. Now let's click on our sphere, and we're going to go to our particles, and we're going to click plus, and it's going to add a emitter to our sphere. So if you click spacebar, something should look like that, and that's the little particles that are being emitted. So we can go down to render here, and we're going to change render as to object, and that's going to give us some more settings to play with. We're going to put our object to the meta ball. So it'll essentially react with the meta ball. So let's go to scale, and let's change the scale a bit. We're going to do scale to probably around 0.5, and then the randomness, to 0.5 as well. So after we do that, we should get the scale of the little emissions increase like that, and it should sort of look very viscous and stuff like that. So now let's change some of the emission settings. So at the top here where it says number, let's bump this up to 5,000 because we want a lot of flame-like particles for our fireball. Let's bring this to 500 as well, and our lifetime to 25, and our lifetime randomness to around 0.8 should be okay. And this is just sort of a rough estimate. If your ball does not look like this or looks different, you might just have to play around with the lifetime, so how long the particles stay alive for, if you will, before they disappear, and the render settings as well, changing the scale of the particles that are being rendered. So next, let's change some of the physics. We're going to change our physics type from Newtonian to fluid, so get more of a liquidy feel, so it should look like that, and looks a little funky right now, but it will pay off in the long run. So now we're going to go to velocity, and since this is a fireball and fire goes upwards, let's add some velocity to the z-axis. Let me go ahead and throw 3.4, should be okay. That looks fine. So let's go ahead and change the buoyancy to 0.7. Let's change the viscosity. Actually, let's keep it at 2. And stiffness should be 0.5. Very nice. So that should add some buoyancy to our particles. And now we can go to advanced all the way down here. Let's turn the repulsion factor to 2. Let's change the stiff to 2 as well. We can go 0.35, and I don't know. Let's keep it at 1. 1 is fine for the rest. Density. If you're worried about the numbers at all, don't worry. This is just what I think personally looks the best, and you can change the settings as well to match your whatever fireballs you're trying to create. So for our fire, we have to make sort of the particles get smaller over time, as they do in real life. So let's go to our texture properties, and let's create a new texture. I'm going to name this texture scale because it's going to be talking about the scale of our particles. And for the type over here, we're going to change it to blend, so it sort of looks like that as well. And we can go to colors and enable on the color ramp, or clamp, excuse me, and the color ramp. So now that we have our color ramp, we're going to go to our textures that says influence. Going to leave pretty much everything the same. We can uncheck general time, and then the one thing we should probably change is the size of them. We can check that. So it looks like that as well. So then let's go to mapping. We're going to change the coordinates from generated to strand/particle, since we're talking about particles here. And then our fireball should look something like that. Not too bad. Not too bad at all. Now let's select our metaball, and we're going to go here to data where it says there, and we're going to change the resolution really quickly to 0.28, and then we can do this to 0.28 as well. So make sure your metaball is selected when you do that, or else this window won't pop up. So it's going to make the resolution of our fireball. We can bump it up a little bit. Now let's move our metaball sort of inside our thing like that. So now it should mesh like that and have a little bit more of a natural emission. So the particles don't look like they're flying out of a sphere. They look sort of fire-like, if you will. So that's pretty much it in terms of the modeling aspect of it. So just a quick recap of what we did was essentially just adding an emission, changing the size and lifetime of the particles, and then just giving it z-velocity so it flies upwards like fire does. So for the second part of this, and the fun part, is the shading. So make sure we have our M ball selected. Let's create a new texture, and then we can just call this fire or something, or whatever you like. Let's delete our principled here. So your fireball should look like this. Let's add a noise texture, and noise textures are a type of texture that are made up of randomized noise, if you will. That kind of looks like smoky or random colorings. Very useful for making fire, smoke, fog, and other things like that. So let's change the settings of our noise texture. Let's put the scale to 0.7, and let's change detail. Let's bump this up to 4, and roughness can stay about the same, probably. Yeah, that's fine. And then let's get some distortion in there as well, so it just has that natural fire aspect. And then let's also add a layer weight. Layer weights are good because they can be applied to shaders that allow multiple layers. You can create like multiple textures and have them sort of blended together. And that's sort of probably what we want to do and what we're going to try to achieve with this. We're not going to change anything on the layer weight. You don't really have to change anything with that. Let's also add a math node right there, and then let's change it to subtract. And math nodes, essentially, if you don't know what they are, they control how image data is processed through different layers of a shader. In this case, we're going to be using the subtraction to essentially subtract color information on the next layer based on the intensity of our noise texture. So what we're going to do is we're going to plug in the FAC, plug it into the first value, and then we're going to take our layer weight and turn facing into the bottom value. So it should look like that. Let's add a color ramp now for the color of our fireball. And then let's change black. Change it to like an orange, like a dark orangey is probably good. I'm going to click plus and create a new color. I want it to be like a yellowy type color like that. That's probably good. And then I'm going to move this slightly over. That looks good. So it's not super white, but it's not super orange. Yeah, that looks fine. And then let's connect this to the back of our color ramp. Now let's add an emission shader because we want our fireball to be glowing, obviously. And to get that color, we're just going to plug that in there. And then, whoops. Now we can plug emission into the surface, and we should get a sort of glowy, orangey texture. And you can obviously change the colors on your color ramp to achieve whatever sort of fire texture you're trying to go for. And you know, it doesn't have to be orange or whatever. You can make like a blue fireball or whatever. Okay, next, let's add a transparent BSDF. Plug it in there, no need to change any of the settings. And then you'll probably get something like this where your ball or your sphere is sort of ugly, poking out. And to do this, you can make that an orange color or just use the same color with the eyedropper tool. And then we want to go back to our meta ball, and we can also bring this to that orangey type thing so you don't really see the balls much. Next, that's going to be pretty much it for the shader. As you can see, not super complicated, but to make this sort of pop more, actually we can bump up the strength too. Not that high obviously, but you know, however high you want your emission to be, that's probably around pretty good. I'm happy with that. But next, let's go over here to the camera thing, to our render settings. I'm in Eevee. You can be in cycles. Just switch it to GPU. That's more of a higher quality render, but more computationally intensive. You can use cycles, but it's more computationally intensive. I'm not really worried about that, so I'm going to use cycles engine. And then we're going to go to bloom. So if you have used Blender before, you may be wondering where bloom is on the right hand side. In Blender 4.2 they actually moved it, so it's no longer in the viewport, but there's a really simple solution to work around this. So first of all, my camera is not at a appealing angle, so I'm going to just move it really quickly so we can get sort of the whole fireball in frame. That's probably good. So after I want to do that, I'm going to go up here to render image. I'm just going to render that really quickly. It's going to look super boring. But after that, I'm going to go to compositing. And if you have the Node Wrangler add-on, you can do what I'm about to do. And if you don't have it, just go to Preferences, Add-ons, and look up Node Wrangler, and then check the box. So what you want to do when you have that is do Control-Shift-Click on render layers. I've already done it, so it's just going to swap between image alpha and noisy image. I'm just going to go back to image, and then your render should pop up right here. And then I'm going to do Shift right click like that to create a connector thingy right there. And then all you got to do is go to Filter, and then Glare, and we're just going to plop it in right there. And then you can see we get our glare. And what you're going to want to do once you have the glare thingy here, we're going to change it to bloom. And then as you can see, it gets super bright right there. We can actually change some of this. We'll probably put threshold to 0.8, and then actually you can bring it up a bit. That's too much. Whoa, that's good. We don't want it too bright. And then after that, we can change the size to however much you like. If you want it to be super bright, you can bump it up. That's probably pretty good. And then the mix, don't really play with that. So yeah, you can change the quality of it as well. I'll just throw it on high quality because why not? So yeah, that's a little post-processing thing to do after you are finished with your fireball and want a little more glow to it. So now it still looks pretty boring in the viewport, but if we go to our rendered, sorry, it's a little laggy. So a little quality of life thing I like to do after I have an object that's comprised of multiple different objects. I'll just create a circle and scale it up a bit, and then we're gonna select our sphere, control click on the M ball, and lastly our circle. It has to be in that order, and then control P, parent the object. So now we have our circle there, and all we have to do is move the circle or whatever object you want. The only downside to this though is, as you can see, it scales everything, so keep that in mind as well. But in our render tab, it is not looking too bad. Looking up over to shading, it's a little more pretty. That's what we're working with. So that's going to pretty much wrap it up for our Fireball tutorial. Play around with the settings, change things to your liking, and hopefully you get something that looks like this sort of stylized, cartoonish Fireball. So thanks for watching, and I will see you guys later.